Okay, thank you for watching this video. Today we are going to talk about adverbs of definite frequency. What it is called is not important. What's important is that you know how to use it correctly in a sentence. Okay, so adverbs of definite frequency are things such as once every day or once a day. You can say that, okay? So once every day or once a day, twice every day or twice a day, 3 times every 2 days or 4 times every month, 4 times a month, and so on and so forth. So adverbs of definite frequency tell you how often you do something more accurately than adverbs of indefinite frequency. What do I mean by that? So let's review a bit. Assume somebody asks you, how often do you go to English class? Of course, you can use adverbs of indefinite frequency to tell him the answer. You can say, as a hyperbole, that I always go to English class. Now, it just means you go to English class a lot, right? But still, from the person who is asking the question, that really doesn't answer the question, right? Because maybe when I ask you how often do you go to English class, I want some number, right? I want 3 times a week, something like that. I want some real answer. I want a real tangible, accurate answer, okay? Right? So just to say I always go to English class really doesn't answer the question. So let's review adverbs of indefinite frequency. If I were to ask you how often do you go to English class, and you say, well, I sometimes go to English class, excuse me, that doesn't really answer the question, okay? Uh, in the same way, I usually go to English class. That doesn't answer the question either. Or I seldom go to English class. That also doesn't answer the question. The only word that answers the question really is this word, because never really is an actual number. Never means zero. So if you have never gone to English class, or you are no longer going to English class, that means you don't go to English class, then of course you can say I never go to English class, right? So really, to answer the question, how often do you go to English class, the only adverb of indefinite frequency that you can use, in other words, the only word from this list that you can use really is the word never. The other ones really doesn't answer the question, okay? And that is why we need adverbs of definite frequency. We need things like once every day, twice a day, 3 times every 2 days, and so on and so forth, okay? So let's talk about adverbs of definite frequency. Example, let's say you are asked, how often do you visit your grandma? Okay, now if your grandmother lived with you in the next room, then perhaps you can say, well, I visit my grandma once every hour. Okay, so once every hour, you knock on her door and you say, hi, grandma, right? Yes, you can visit your grandma once an hour if you live with your grandma, right? If she is just next door. Okay, so notice I can say once every hour, or I can say once an hour, right? Because it's just 1 hour, okay? And when I say that, I mean that I visit my grandmother one time in an hour, okay? One time in an hour. In 1 hour, I visit her one time. In other words, one time in 1 hour, right? Okay. All right. But let's say you live in a very big house and your grandmother is on the other side of the big house. So you don't visit your grandmother once every hour, once an hour. You visit her once every 2 hours, okay? So maybe you visit your grandmother once every 2 hours, okay? Once every 2 hours. Now in this case, you cannot say once and 2 hours because now we're looking at 2 hours, not 1 hour. So you no longer can say the word and, okay? So once every 2 hours is your only option. So this choice is gone. You don't have this choice anymore, okay? All right. So what does that mean? That means you visit your grandmother one time in 2 hours, okay? One time in 2 hours. So because it's 2 now, you may not use the article am, okay, or a, okay? So that is probably the most important difference that you have to know. Okay, continue. Perhaps, okay, your grandmother lives not with you in the same house. She lives next door in the house next door, right next door to you, okay? Still very convenient. You can still visit her often. Where's my often? Often's gone. Okay. You can still visit her often, just perhaps not once an hour. Okay. So perhaps you visit your grandmother once every day. Once every day, or once a day, right? Because we're still talking about 1 day, right? So one time in 1 day. So therefore you can say because means one, right? Okay, one time in 1 day, once a day. Perhaps you live on a farm and her house is not right next door to you, but it's perhaps a few hundred yards down. You live in a very big farm. Perhaps you visit your grandmother once every 2 days. Okay? Once every 2 days. In other words, once in 2 days. Again, because now we're talking about 2 days, right? The option, the choice to say no longer is available, okay? You cannot say anymore because it's 2 days now, okay? So one time in 2 days is 2. So you cannot say anymore, okay? So this option is no longer there for you, okay? Perhaps you live in the same town as your grandmother, okay, but just not on the same street, and you are very busy. So perhaps you visit your grandmother once every week or once a week, right? Once every week or once a week, okay? Which means you visit your grandmother one time in a week, one time in a week, one time in 1 week, right? Okay. Perhaps your very, very busy and you cannot visit your grandmother one time in a week, one time in 1 week, once every week, once a week, perhaps you can visit her only once every 3 weeks. Okay? Again, because now we're talking about 3 weeks, you can no longer say okay, you cannot say anymore because we're talking about 3. So once in 3 weeks, the option to say is closed. You cannot say that. Okay? Good. Perhaps you're even busier than that, and you can only visit your grandmother once every month, once a month, right? One time in a month, one time in 1 month, about 30 days. Okay? Or if you live very, very far away, let's say your grandmother lives in Japan and you live here, and perhaps you can only visit your grandmother, if you're lucky, once every 6 months, right? Once every 6 months. That's half a year. Again, because now we're talking about 6 months, you cannot say anymore, okay? Right? And once every 6 months, of course, means one time in 6 months. And then we can extrapolate, we can push forward and say once a year, once every year, once every 2 years, and then you cannot say once 2 years, obviously, that doesn't make sense. Or we have up till this point only been talking about once. Perhaps it's not one time, perhaps it's twice, right? Twice means 2 times. Twice, okay? Perhaps it's twice, okay? So you can say twice every day or twice a day, right? And that means 2 times in a day, 2 times in 1 day, right? Yes. Or it could be 3 times every day or 3 times a day, 3 times in 1 day. Okay? 4 times, 5 times, so on and so forth. Okay? So I can say how many times every how many days, how many months, how many weeks. Okay? And that is what we mean by adverbs of definite frequency. Okay? Okay. There is a little bit of a special thing I want to talk about, which is there is a word for 3 times, which is thrice. Okay? But you don't often hear it. You can say it. It is used, but you just don't often hear it. Okay? So basically 1 time is once, 2 times is twice, 3 times is thrice, and then from 4 times on, you just say 4 times, 5 times, that's 6 times, 7 times, and so on and so forth. Okay? So that's the first thing that you should remember. Thrice means, whoops, I didn't want to do that. Thrice means 3 times. Okay. Here is another thing that you might want to remember. Everybody knows this every day. Okay? Perhaps you have been saying this word for many years. Every day. Okay, but what does every day mean? Well, every day actually implies once every day. Okay, so whenever you say every day, remember you really mean to say once every day. Okay, in other words, once a day. Okay, so remember, anytime you say every day, remember you are really saying once every day or once a day. Okay, as in, I take a shower every day, which implies I take a shower once every day, or I take a shower once a day. Okay, and that is the rules for adverbs of definite frequency. Let's do some practice. Well, how often do you eat breakfast? Let's say. How often do you eat breakfast? Well, let's come up with a number first, right? Probably like that. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, well, that it probably means that you eat breakfast one time in one day. So let's remember that. Okay, let's remember these two numbers. One time in one day. How do you say that? Think about that, right? How do you say one time? Correct. Once. How do you say one day? A day. There you go. Once a day. Okay. Now again, you have the other choice, which is you can say once every day. It's up to you. You can either say this or that. Either this, once every day, or once a day. Remember, however, this option is not always open to you, right? Sometimes you can't say okay, right? We're going to do that right now. What if I asked you a question? How often do you brush your teeth? I hope you don't brush your teeth once a day. That is too few, okay? So, probably 2 or 3 times. I think most of us brush our teeth 2 times, right? In a day, right? Okay. So let's get those numbers out. 2 times in one day. Okay. So what is the word for 2 times? Twice. Very good. And how do you say one day? A day. Voila. You've got it. Twice a day. Again, you can say twice every day. They are the same. Twice a day, twice every day. Twice a day, twice every day. Now let's suppose I ask you another question. How often do you ride a bike? Perhaps you love riding a bike so much that you can ride it twice every day. Maybe, right? Maybe. But for most of us, probably not. Okay, right? But let's say you live next to a park and you are lucky enough to be able to ride your bike perhaps, every, let's say, 3 days, you can ride it one time. Let's get those numbers out. Let's say the number is one time, every 3 days. Okay, so 1, 3. How do you say one time? Once. How do you say 3 days? Well, 3 days. Notice now I cannot say anymore, right? Because now it's 3. Now it's 3. And I cannot say So now I have to say the other one, right? If I can't say I must say every, okay? If I can't say I must say every. I cannot say because I cannot say 3, that doesn't make sense. So I must say every, okay? So once every 3 days, okay? How often do you see a doctor? Okay, let's say you see a doctor every 6 months, and you go to see a doctor twice. So the numbers are 2 times every 6 months. How do you say 2 times? Twice. How do you say 6 months? 6 months. Can you say No. We have the number 6 over here. You cannot say 6. That doesn't make sense, right? So because we can't say we must say every. Voila. Twice every 6 months. So let's go back. How often do you eat breakfast? I eat breakfast once a day. There it is. How often do you brush your teeth? I brush my teeth twice every day. How often do you ride a bike? I ride a bike. I ride a bike. I ride a bike. Once every 3 days. How often do you see a doctor? I see a doctor twice every 6 months. Very, very easy, straightforward if you follow the steps. Write down the numbers, how many times, how many days, how many months, how many weeks, and then follow the rules, and then you can't go wrong. Thank you for watching. See you soon.